I'm Madhu Khanna. I'm the Interim Director of the Institute for Sustainability, Energy and Environment, and also a Professor of Agriculture and Consumer Economics here at the University of Illinois. I'm going to be moderating this session, and we're really delighted to have such an excellent lineup of panelists that represent different realms within, in practicing sustainability in the private sector. So let me start by introducing the three that we have, and hopefully the fourth person will be able to join pretty soon. So Holly Emerson is the Global Senior Director of the Global Sustainability Team at Johnson Controls. Um, Stu Levenick is the former Group President of Caterpillar Inc. and is currently a Lead Director at Grainger and Entergy Corporation. He's also a member of the Board of Directors at Finning International, among other institutions that he serves on. And then we have Chris O'Brien, who is the Director of Business Development at CustomerFirst Renewables. We're waiting for Pedro Leon de la Barra, and hopefully he will join soon. So I'd like to thank our panelists for taking the time to meet with us and our students and in this inaugural ELP workshop that we are having today focused on corporate sustainability. And so the format that we're planning to have is to spend about 30 to 40 minutes on questions that have been suggested by the students, and then we have about 10 minutes at the end for an open Q&A. Also, just to remind the students that there will be a chance to network with the panelists and ask more in-depth questions after this is over, and there's a networking event that's going to follow. All right, so let me start with our three panelists and ask them to talk a little bit about, their professional journey and what brought them, to being in this role where they are leaders in sustainability in the companies that they work on. So let me start with Holly.
Hello, good afternoon. I guess it's good morning. Good morning, everyone. It's 11:30 here. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So thanks for including me on this panel. It's quite an honor, and it's a pleasure to speak to all these students today. I started my career I graduated in 1990 with a BSME degree. So I have an engineering background, started off as a product engineer in industrial pumps. I've been working, ever since I graduated from college, and I've always been in the industry space, so the manufacturing space. For some reason, that's just kind of where my fit is. But I went from product engineering to sales, to inside sales management. And when I moved to North Carolina, I actually took a role with Ingersoll Rand and their microturbine business. And I got really involved in alternative energy at that point, and that was around 2002. So things were starting to kind of accelerate in the sustainability world. And I was pretty deep in alternative energy. These microturbines, I was in charge of market development for the biogas markets, and they could use low BTU fuels to generate, clean electricity and potable hot water. So it was a great distributed generation solution, small stuff, 250 kilowatts, and great application for fugitive emissions, like methane emissions and from wastewater treatment plants, landfills, that sort of thing. And that really just kind of evolved. I mean, I think that my journey is very similar to a lot of people my age in sustainability, where it's an evolution. Some people started off on the technology side, some people started off on the communications and marketing side, some people started off on the kind of environmental compliance side. We kind of come from all different realms, but around kind of this common theme of developing sustainability strategies for large companies and managing the sustainability program for large companies that in a material way, in a way that's meaningful to the organization, I guess. So, and really trying to embed sustainability throughout the organization. I mean, one of the things that I've heard from my peers, which has resonated with me throughout the years, is that we our ultimate objective is really to work ourselves out of the job, right? So, you know, there's sometime in the future, there will not be a sustainability PMO in the organization. It will be embedded throughout. You know, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of my journey and where I see the next 5 to 10 years too.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Stu?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I started a little earlier than Holly did. I graduated from the University of Illinois in 1976 with an undergraduate Bachelor's of Science in Forestry. And I got to that through a circuitous path while I was an undergraduate, starting in engineering and working my way into life science, and ultimately ecology was a big thing at the time, as Holly alluded to the transition that was occurring, environment, ecology, and I just liked life science, and that's why I graduated. So at the time when I had planned to go to work for a large forest products company like International Paper Warehouser, there was a recession on at the time, and I wound up going to work for a company in my hometown called Caterpillar. And after 38 years with them, I retired about 5 years ago, and now I'm, as Madhu said, I'm on the board of directors path with a number of different companies. I guess I would just sort of echo what the previous speaker said, and Holly alluded to a little bit, that this has been a transition over all that period of time for me. I've never been a sustainability expert. I've had a passion for it, but it's been a transition that has steadily, I would say, accelerated over that period of time. And today, I think it's really gaining traction in all the companies that I'm engaged with. To pick up on something that Holly said, I think if we're successful, some of the the expertise in this area will apply across the entire company, and a PMO for sustainability will be not needed in the future. I think that's well underway right now. There isn't, of the businesses I'm involved with, they're heavily engaged in all aspects of what the previous speaker talked about, of a sustainable operating activity at a company that is really driven by success and economic profitability. So my role in it has primarily been from the policy standpoint at various companies, and I would tell you right now that it's got a lot of traction. It's alive and well. So I'll stop there so we can have some discussion after the other panels talk.
Thanks, Stu. So I noticed we have been joined by Pedro. So welcome, Pedro. Pedro Leon de la Barra. He's the project manager at Soul Customer Solutions. So Pedro, if you'd like to talk a little bit about your journey to get to where you are, and I know you play a major role in trying to increase solar energy around the world. So.
Thank you. I'm sorry I joined late. I was having a little trouble with Zoom. I work for Soul Systems. We have just completed the construction on the University of Illinois Solar Farm 2.0, which is the image that you can see behind me. My journey in the solar industry, I started trying to do cold sales for commercial solar projects here in the District of Columbia where I live, and ended up not being a great salesperson. So then I trained to do solar construction, and I spent about a year up on people's roofs installing solar panels on their homes, and then transitioned from there to managing commercial solar projects. And I've been doing that for a number of years now. And that brought me to Soul Systems, where I'm a project manager, and I work on getting solar projects built right now, mainly in Illinois, but other states too. Just in terms of sustainability, I'm working very closely with our internal sustainability task force. We have a mission to try to make our solar projects sustainable. And what we mean by that is that we want to try to reduce the environmental footprint of our solar projects through understanding how the manufacturing of the equipment, mostly the silicon solar panels, how the impact of that manufacturing can be minimized, and then understanding how we can have a positive impact on the landscapes where we install solar projects. So as part of that effort, we had the good fortune to, thanks to Eric here and a group of students here at the university, we had an analysis done on project impacts of the University of Illinois Solar Farm 2.0. And that really kicked off our internal efforts in the company to try and set goals and standards for how we develop solar projects and how we source our materials going forward. So I'll leave it there, and happy to answer any questions on that.
Yeah, thanks, Pedro. And then last, we've got Chris O'Brien, who's the Director of Business Development at CustomerFirst Renewables. Chris.
Thanks, Madhu. So interesting group of folks here, all kinds of different backgrounds, and I think that's my story about how I came to sustainability is reflected in the diversity of this panel, which is to say that sustainability touches everything, and so my own academic background is that the way my brain works is that I see the connections between a lot of these different disciplines, and what that meant when I was an undergrad is that I didn't know what I wanted. I wanted to study everything, and so I went from philosophy, then switched my major to African studies, and then switched my major to science, technology, and society, and then realized that if I didn't stick with something soon, I wasn't going to graduate on time. So I created a new degree that was called liberal studies that allowed me to just say, well, really what I was grappling for was sustainability, but that as a discipline and as a profession hadn't coalesced yet. So Penn State allowed me to say, well, here's how these three things relate, and so that you can graduate on time, go ahead and call it a new degree. And then I spent 15 years in environmental nonprofits, but really there were sustainability nonprofits, and what that meant was that they were using market forces to achieve both social and environmental change. It really wasn't until about 10 years ago or 12 years ago that I got a job with sustainability in the title. I was the sustainability director at American University here in DC, where I live. And it wasn't until doing that job that I realized that the area where I felt I could have the biggest impact on sustainability was energy. So for the past 10 years or so, I've focused exclusively on helping specifically colleges and universities capture the benefits, both social and environmental, of large-scale renewable energy. And that's where I am today.
Yeah, great. So it's sort of really clear listening to you all that you've all had a circuitous journey trying to get to where you are, and you found your passion and been able to do what you were hoping to identify through this process. What would you advise students who are graduating or at the University of Illinois and are interested in sustainability as a way to maybe make their journey less circuitous? Students are interested in sustainability, but it's often hard to find a position that has sustainability in its title as your first job. So how do you go about from your first, what should you be looking for should you necessarily look for jobs that have sustainability in the title in your first position, or is that something that you kind of grow into and develop, as you grow in an organization? So I'll open it up and just feel free to any of the panelists to address it, and hopefully just...
I can start. I can take a crack at it. My personal opinion is this evolution of sustainability and this kind of migration to, or evolution, migration to sustainability groups it may be near a peak. So I recently changed jobs. So I came from Train Technologies and now I work with Johnson Controls. And when I was looking for positions, I'd recently finished my MBA, and I was really thinking about, knowing the whole landscape of sustainability, I was thinking, what do I want to do? Because I knew that jobs, sustainability per se, jobs in an organization, there just aren't many of them. There just aren't many. I mean, there are organizations that there's 3 of us in a $23 billion company, 100,000 employees that have the title of sustainability, right? So it's going to be really hard if you narrow your search just on that criterion. You really need to think about what are my passions, right? And actually Chris kind of, he had his passions all, apparently has passions all over the place, broad, scope. And how do you channel those into a position that has that sustainability lens to it? And so like when I coming out of an MBA, I was thinking, well, first I knew that that's the master's that I wanted to get. I had to decide that first. But then I was kind of like, well, where do I want to focus? Because I know that where I'm really passionate is around ESG disclosures and renewable energy. And so that's kind of the path I took. I happened to land in this position. I think it was kind of luck, which actually is which is a sustainability management role, because I also have a passion around the strategy of it. But there are a ton of jobs out there right now with financial institutions looking for ESG professionals, people that understand the different industries and how ESG plays a role, or sustainability plays a role in those industries. Renewable energy, Ørsted a year ago you went on their job boards and they must have had 100 jobs just for design engineers or in sales. All across the board, because they're really ramping up for the offshore development projects in the US. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that find what your passion is and look to find a role in that particular area with a sustainability lens and apply that sustainability lens to it.
Okay, thanks. Stu, would you like to?
Well, I guess I'd add on to that. I think what's, at least from my perspective, and again, it's not an entry-level employee, so I'm looking at a board of directors and a governance lens, I guess, at companies. What I see happening in industry today is we're making a transition over a number of years here from a compliance perspective to more of sustainability, just the way you do business. It's going to apply to every function in a company, every division in a company. We still need experts that are going to guide us on what the tactics are to achieve some of those things. But ultimately what's happening right now, I think, is ESG is becoming kind of a foundational element for most companies and how they govern their companies, how they hire their people, what their products are. I guess one thing I would encourage, in addition to the expertise within the science around what you may be studying with regards to sustainability, is a broad understanding of the balance between, and this is what relates to companies, and it gets to this previous question, is will sustainability save capitalism? I think I'm on the other side. I think capitalism ultimately saves sustainability, because ultimately if you have a balance between care for the environment and economics, I think you've got a real sustainable solution. And that's what's happening right now. Traction is being gained by most industries right now as they look for this area as an opportunity to grow their businesses and grow them profitably. And so as a student, I think your basic grounding in sustainability science, but also with a balance on things like economics, things like HR, things like social studies, finance are critical to being part of that business solution that's going to drive this forward and really make it part of the way that the industry operates going forward.
Yeah. So one of the things that both you and Holly said, which was interesting, is that, you know, we are hopefully evolving towards a future where there isn't a position, you know, or a couple of positions in the company that are titled sustainability, but sustainability is inherent in everybody's job description. And so, you know, as a student, I mean, a graduating person who's looking for a job, how do you navigate yourself to a company that you think will offer those options for you? I mean, what kinds of things should you look at? And I guess just to make the contrast between, say, you know, Caterpillar and you know, Johnson Controls, which are producing regular products, you know, whereas we've got CustomerFirst Renewable or Soul Systems that are producing these green products, solar energy. So they're in their name itself, they've got sustainability built into that. And I suppose, you know, you have a path as a student to work for a company that is providing a green product, or a company that is providing, you know, regular everyday things, and yet being able to do that in a sustainable way. So, Stu, I mean, or Holly, you know, how challenging is it or have you found it to be kind of build sustainability into the job descriptions that you had, because you were passionate about it?
Yeah, I think Madhu, it's a really good question, but I think it all kind of depends on, first of all, the student's passion. What are you really passionate about? What industries do you like? And it's like any other job. I mean, you know, who do you want to work for? There's a set of values, and you can study and learn what those companies stand for. But I think in terms of finding something sustainable, you're going to find that virtually every good company today has got activities. Take Caterpillar, for example. You think, well, okay, they manufacture diesel engines and bulldozers and gas turbines. But within those industries or those products, you know, tremendous activity going on about renewable fuels, fuel cell technology, hydrogen technology. Everything they make is reusable to 95%. So you can sort of find your sustainable path within an industry, you know, depending on what your own set of values and interests are. And the same thing is true of everything else. The previous speaker talked about Walmart. The distribution industry is totally different than power generation, which is one of the boards I'm on. But they're very compatible and going in different directions, but in a sustainable manner to basically get to a net zero by a certain period of time. So I think you're going to be able to find, you know, an aspect of this sustainability issue, regardless of, particularly in the right companies, virtually any industry that you look at.
I think that's a really good point. I think there's a couple ways you can look at this. You know, you're going to be new graduates. You have a lot to learn about how business does business. You know, and when you think about your passions, there's two kind of different paths you could take. You could take the path of fast learning. So you could try to join a company or look for companies that have a lot of, say you're interested in renewable energy, since we kind of, you know, have a preponderance of that on the panel. Yay. You could look at a company like Google or Walmart or any large consumer of electricity, and look for a position on their energy team, because you will learn a lot. I mean, you'll learn how they go to market, the issues. I mean, and you'll learn the broad spectrum. You'll understand how policy advocacy impacts what they can do. You'll understand the finance piece of it. So there's a lot of different aspects to any of these particular disciplines. So you can take that approach. You could also take the approach of looking for a company that has strong performance, good commitments, but maybe is a little more in the nascent phase of their sustainability strategy, and you would have a huge opportunity to grow in that role. You'd kind of be learning on the fly, but you have the potential, I think, of growth in a position like that, because if you're going to join a company that doesn't have that in-house expertise, you can bring that in and help shape kind of that discipline within the company. I think that's a tremendous opportunity. You just have to be prepared to really work hard and be willing to reach out. There's a huge network of professionals that you can reach out to, organizations you can join, and that sort of thing to learn. But so I think there's two different ways you could approach it. It's still rapidly evolving. I mean, for example, we have in our treasury team, we happen to have a CFO and a treasury lead that is really interested in renewable energy and green financing. And so they're bringing that lens to their job without us even, I mean, they brought it to us. They said, hey, we want to issue a green bond. We're one of the first industrials to do that. And it was like 9 times oversubscribed. So I think just think about those different opportunities.
So Pedro and Chris, for businesses that are sort of providing renewable, environmentally friendly products like renewable energy, such as yours, what are sort of the job prospects? Assume they're growing, but from your perspective, do you see that this is a growing industry? And what might be good training and in terms of that you look for when you hire, students sort of straight out of school? What kinds of training and experiences are helpful?
Pedro, is your finger on the button there, or do you want me to go?
Oh, please go ahead.
Okay. I think it's a combination. I think Holly said this early on, that this is simplifying it, but there are sort of 2 tracks. There's kind of the hard skill, hard science functional track in sustainability, where you've got a clear hard skill, versus more of a communications side. And not that that's not a hard skill, but what I mean by it is it's more of a, they're different types of disciplines. And in our business, first of all, just to let folks know, we don't build solar projects, or we don't build anything. We're advisors, consultants. So we help people understand the renewable energy industry and participate in it. And that requires both of these skills. It requires the hard skill of understanding how the market works, and analyzing the performance of different solar and wind projects, modeling them financially, and running a whole battery of risk assessments. But then equally importantly is being able to communicate what that means to a university or a large corporation that's trying to make a decision about how to participate in the renewable energy marketplace. So if you can't, you can run models all day, but if you can't concisely convey what's important about the outputs of those models, then the recipient of the information can't make a decision. So you really have to have both. And I think all of the speakers have been saying this, is that, follow your passion. It sounds cliche, but I think it's true. Follow your passion and figure out, are you the kind of person that wants to go narrow but deep, and have a really finely tuned skill that's in high demand, or more broad and shallow, where you're kind of synthesizing lots of pieces of information. And I would say that the latter aligns a little bit more on the communication side, and the former aligns more on kind of the sciences and technology side. And yes, there are more and more jobs. Just our own company, as an example, we've grown in the last 2 years from about 8 people to about 45. And right now our challenge is figuring out how to serve all of our new clients with while we're trying to hire more people as quickly as we can.
Great, thanks. Pedro?
Yeah, and Sol Systems also is growing, and I think the whole solar industry is growing very fast. So I can speak a little bit about the solar world. I think one thing that's always going to be in high demand is engineering, engineers, and something that's very useful for whoever wants to take an engineering role in a solar company is to be able to use CAD software and be able to use modeling software. There's a few different types of programs that are used in the solar industry for design. So that's something that for people who just graduated, I think is a very good path to a good career. Other types of roles that we have in the industry are construction roles and construction management roles. So usually expertise or experience with the construction world is very useful for those types of roles. Then there's the whole finance and sales side, where Chris was mentioning a little bit about expertise in modeling, creating financial models, and having experience working with project finance and with sort of like financial contracts is something that also opens up a lot of doors on the financing side of solar projects. There's also a lot of development work. So any experience with real estate development, with like land leasing and permitting and things like that is also very valuable. And I think finally, I would say there's also policy expertise. So a lot of the projects, or I would say all of the projects, have to will depend on things like local, like state regulations and state incentives, and things like what state utility commissions are deciding. So if that's something that interests you, I think there's also a lot of demand out there for people who will be experts in that sort of energy policy and local regulations.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. So it's so clear hearing you all that, you know, what is needed is obviously technical skills in whichever discipline subject, you know, you as a student you're majoring in, but there's also the need for this additional, you know, knowledge, awareness, softer skills, you know, that are needed, and which are things that, you know, you sort of acquire in addition to the technical skills and through taking the coursework. Do you think that particularly, you know, in the area of sustainability, there is greater value in trying to develop these softer skills, you know, being able to work in a team, you know, just walk and talk at the same time, whatever. I mean, these additional things that are kind of hard to teach in classes. They're also probably hard to teach on the job, but you kind of have to develop them on your own. And so is sustainability particularly, you know, because it's not such a well-defined field in every company, but you have to kind of make it your own. What are some of these other experiences that you would encourage students to have if they're interested in pursuing a career in this area?
Well, yeah, you're right. Softer skills are really important. I think they'll always be important, but they're really important right now for sustainability professionals, because traditionally we've kind of served as the role of the influencer in the organization. That's becoming less so. I mean, a really good example is the SEC will probably issue a rulemaking that saying that companies have to report emissions in their 10K filings, which has never been done before. And this is a metric that may not rise to the level in exactness as financial metrics. And so that's a huge hurdle that we're going to have to overcome. That all of a sudden is not, it becomes a compliance thing again, right? It becomes a, you know, we have to get our auditor of record to review our data, make sure our controls are in place and all that sort of thing. And it becomes less of an influencing role and more of a compliance role. But yeah, it's, I mean, you're influencing all across, you know, the breadth and the depth of the organization. I mean, you have to be able to activate the grassroots and you know, inspire the treetops, as we say, and everybody in between. You have to, you know, traditionally that's kind of been the wasteland where the middle management always has a P&L and they have priorities that are separate from sustainability, and that's where your ability to influence strategy and engage the top and the bottom really are helpful. So yeah, I would say that that's a big soft skill, is serving as the influencer role.
Other thoughts? So let me turn it over to John Fitzgerald, who has a question about the role that outside talent in the form of consultants play in the sustainability area within a company. John?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, Chris, I know you're working in the advisor role for advising companies and helping them match their business problems with solutions involved with the sustainability space. But I was wondering for everyone else there too, kind of what, it would be interesting to hear the role of like outsourcing research or outsourcing possible solutions and how that falls into businesses, and where do you need other people to connect the dots for you, or can you do that all in-house? And is there a reason for choosing one versus the other?
I don't want to be the only one talking, but you want to take a crack at it, Stu?
Yeah, John, I would just say that it kind of depends on the state of transition for the various firm. You know, in the beginning, I think probably everybody relied on, well, one, it all started with compliance, right? The NGOs pushing, government regulations were pushing, and that was the beginning of awareness by companies that they had to do something. And so they began a journey of, you know, building some expertise around meeting certain compliance guidelines. As this thing has progressed, they began to build in-house capabilities. And to this day, I think you have, all companies are in various stages of transition. Some of them are way out on the leading edge, and some are laggards, and everything in between. And they're building skills and capabilities all the way through. In the end, I think the successful firms have found out that this isn't just compliance. This is a real business opportunity to balance really attractive economics with care for the environment and all the social attributes that come from that, as well as the business attributes. And so you're going to find, depending on, as you're looking at different companies, you're going to find, it's very easy to find out because companies today are, especially the good ones, are publishing all this stuff. As Holly mentions, the SEC is getting involved to basically establish a standard compliance framework so that we can start to compare companies, very well side by side, who's good, who's bad, that kind of thing. And there's some integrity in the reporting. So I think you've got a laundry list, or you would have a laundry list of various options to look at. But because of the nature of the transition, I think there's a huge amount of firms out there, and I'm sure that Chris is calling on many of them to help them along this journey. And so there's a big opportunity externally as well, and that's going to continue for some time, I would think.
Yeah, I would say that every organization is different. Every firm is different. I came from one where one of the advantages of using consultants, whether they're lobbyists or or like a CustomerFirst Renewables that advises on procurement. The advantage is you can leverage your spend kind of, or your own expertise. So you can manage the consultants and deliver a higher product in a shorter amount of time through the help of partnering with consultants than you could alone. Another example is like scenario assessments. We're looking at that now, and we would like to use the Royal Dutch Shell model. And I'm kind of evaluating, do we want to get trained internally to do that? Or do we want to have a consultant come in and kind of moderate that, that process? So, but every company is different. Some companies just prefer to do everything in-house. So it just depends. But I think there's certainly a role for that expertise still. And I think there will continue to be.
The factor, it's a good question. And the factors that I see most commonly driving whether to bring a function in-house or to outsource it are three. One is, I think as Stu mentioned, what's the stage of development of acquiring that skill yourself? Like if you don't have it at all, you might need to start by getting some outside advice and then determine whether to bring it in-house longer term. Second is it core to your business? So would you ever want to bring it in-house even if you could? Or are you better off having permanently, an outsourced advisor or consultant? And three, what's the long-term outside or inside knowledge or skill is? In other words, is it something that you need to do once and then you're done? And if so, why would you build an inside capability for something that you don't need long-term? Or is it something that, because it's core to your business and because it's got a deep need that you're going to be able to that you're going to need to repeat over and over again, then that would indicate that the need to build that capability in-house.
Yeah, and that's basically that's not fundamentally different than any other function within a company. You use SAP or McKinsey or Deloitte or somebody to come in from a, it's the same filler that Chris just described. I don't really see it as any different.
I would also add that this space has historically been dominated with a lot of boutique firms, but they're being acquired by the larger firms now. So they're no longer boutique, but the boutique firms are very nimble and easy to work with and a little bit cheaper than the big four historically, although I've had good results with both.
So we'll open it up to questions that any of the students might have directly from the panelists. Just feel free to unmute yourself or send me a message in chat, and if you're interested in asking a question, or just raise your hand. While we're waiting, we have about 10 minutes to do that. While we're waiting for you to think of your questions you'd like to ask, let me sort of pose one other question to the panelists. And, in your experience, how much of the sustainability policy in your company is top down, is developed by the top management? And what might be a role for an incoming, new employee to help in shaping that policy? Or do you have to wait for direction from the top, or can you play a role? Is there, I assume it varies across companies and things, but just in your experience, what have you found? Is it mainly top down, or is there also room for bottom up?
I can start with that and just say I think we aspire to be a company which places sustainability as a core value, but I think the priorities from the top are always going to be focused on making sure that the business is doing well and that the company can keep doing what it's doing. So I think that it is essential for sustainability initiatives to actually happen in any company. It is essential for them to come from the bottom, and for there to be a very clear voice from all the employees, that is something that they want from their company. And that's something that I work on a lot. It's often not really something. It's often not a priority because the priorities are getting the work done and making sure that it's done on time and within budget. But I think it has to come from the bottom. And I just wanted to also say to John Fitzgerald's question, I think I would echo what Chris said, that we basically have two sustainability initiatives related to solar projects. One of them, we're going to hire an external consultant to help us on, because we don't have that expertise in-house, and it's not a core activity of the company, which is understanding the solar panel manufacturing process. But then there's another activity which is understanding what the impacts are that we have on land that we build solar projects on. And I think that's something, because we're so much closer to it, that's something where we probably will be creating more in-house tasks and roles that deal with it, and where we continue to track the impacts of our work.
Madhu, I think just to remember the question, I think your question was, is the direction of a sustainability effort at a company top down, and do lower level employees have influence on that? Was that kind of the gist of the question? Okay. Well, I mean, certainly the strategy of every company is going to be led from the top, but I think one of the changes that I've observed over the last 30 years is a steady drumbeat on well-managed companies trying to get their employees, all employees, more engaged. That's sort of the heart of ESG. The E is environment, the S is social, and that gets into how you treat your employees and your communities and engage your employees. And then governance is how it all gets governed and managed. But at least in the firms I've been involved with, there's been an increasing activity for senior leaders to get all employees engaged in this discussion. And I only know my experience at Caterpillar, we were getting, of course, we're a global company of 120,000 employees, so 140,000 employees. So we had different parts of the world were at different levels of this sustainability journey. Europe was probably the leader in this. And so we were getting regular feedback. We had a sustainability objective, but we were getting feedback from employees that we were either not doing enough, or here's some things we ought to be doing. And so that really did help, to shape our strategy going forward. And I think, again, as you're looking at prospective companies, one of the things you want to look at is that part of this ESG equation, the social part of it. How do they engage with employees? Do they have corporate resource committees? Do they have employee groups that are constantly engaged to help inform on strategy and customer insight and those kinds of things? So there's a lot out there, I think, today that 20 years ago you wouldn't have known. But today I think companies are being much more open and transparent about the relationship they want to have with their employees, what their sustainability goals are, who's engaged in helping formulate that. And I think that's a good way to understand what you're getting into before you go too far.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I mean, you don't have a sustainability program really that's going to actually accomplish anything unless it's an edict from the top down. But I don't think that's a problem anymore. I think that, maybe it is, but we are still in, and I'm trying to think how many companies. I'm looking right now to see how many companies. 2,300 businesses and investors signed on to the We Are Still In initiative, which was basically after the last administration pulled out of Paris. There was an NGO effort to get signatories to say, the U.S. may be out of Paris, but we're still committed to the climate accord. And when you have that, that's kind of the North Star, right? So, and so that's extremely important. but I think that what goes along with that, like what Stu was saying, is the bottom up. So somebody that's coming in to constantly challenge the status quo. I mean, challenge people to, setting a science-based target is no easy feat. And you're getting your product design teams to say, we're committing to reducing the energy consumption of our products by X amount over 10 years. And it's going to be really hard, but we're going to have to think differently about it. And here's how we're going to go about doing it. And there are a lot of levers that you pull to get there, obviously, but without challenging from the bottom up. And I think that the younger generation has a role to play there. That's how you kind of close the loop, I guess, if you will. But you need both to drive change. I would say, though, that just a recommendation is, when you do challenge the status quo, recognize that there are people in the company that have had many, many years of experience and have seen things come and go, and honor their expertise and their history, and try to learn something about where the company's been and their history and their journey, so that you can kind of leverage that to help make change, right? Because if you appreciate that legacy, then your voice around making change around climate is going to have a lot more credibility.
All right. So if the students have any questions, this would be a great time to ask our panelists. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm just curious, so with sustainability having so many conflicting priorities, I know earlier we talked about biodiversity preservation, greenhouse gas mitigation. Are there any particular arenas of sustainability that you've seen have been on the incline recently? And as someone who's looking to enter the sustainability space, do you recommend focusing on one priority, or sort of looking holistically at how a company can be sustainable?
Sure, I'll comment on that. I think if you think about materials, energy, and water as three large categories of that frame a lot of sustainability work. Materials, we're the first. Materials, because they're so tangible and obvious, the movement looked at materials first. So, right, think about curbside recycling. In the last 10 to 15 years, as the cost of renewables has come down, we've made a lot of progress on renewables. Today, where I think the cutting edge is, we're really, really early in understanding and designing solutions around water. So if you want to shape a strategy at a company or an organization, water is, I think, where people have done the least amount of work. And it's early days, and therefore exciting and fun just from a personal standpoint, because you'd be innovating new solutions.
Alexa, I think we're just getting warmed up. So right now the focus is on renewables, and that's appropriate. That's one part of the future. Chris is right. Water's another one. But I think if you look at things like potential, you're hearing a lot about hydrogen now as a potential, particularly as it's paired with renewables. Battery storage is another one that's a big driver for a different path for technology in the future. Small modular reactors is another one. Nuclear is probably going to have a comeback, and on the horizon is fusion. So there's all kinds of activity here that's underway. And I guess I would, Holly mentioned it, but the Paris Accords, forget about the politics, but when the United States backed out of that, nothing stopped with industrial development around sustainability. I mean, companies continue to go forward. And so that just tells me that the traction that this issue is getting across all industry is really accelerating. And I think on a variety of fronts, you're going to see opportunity going forward.
Okay, so something I am wondering about is in this process of getting upper level executives or mid-level executives to, I suppose, acknowledge, understand the value of sustainability in the corporate sector. What does that process look like? So you're coming into this company and you see ways that the company could make changes to kind of support sustainability initiatives. How can you execute that? How can you pursue that? What are recommendations that you have for us as we begin, entry-level positions to kind of pursue bigger changes?
I can speak to that. If you're in a company and you don't see that it has a detailed sustainability strategy, or any group that's working on sustainability, I would recommend that you form a sustainability group or sustainability club within the company that could meet every week or every 2 weeks and talk about what you can propose to upper management in terms of making the business more sustainable, making process improvements, or putting out ideas out there, and then talk to your manager and other people's managers about it, and make presentations to the different groups in the company. That's probably one type of initiative you can have. And just want to go back to Alexa's question before. I recommend that you focus on one thing, really specialize right now as you're starting your career. I think you'll have a lot of time to broaden your focus, but I think the best way for you to grow is to grow on focusing on one thing that you are passionate about or that you believe opens you up to opportunities.
Thanks, Pedro. Other thoughts from Stu, Chris, Holly?
Well,
Actually, I was just going to say, if you can swing it, join a peer group, and like we're members of GBEN, or even just go to Green Biz conferences or something like that. Sounds kind of cliche, but when you get in one of these kind of non-competitive groups of people, I mean, even like here in Charlotte, we have the Sustainability Lunch Bunch, and there's like 40 of us that are members, and we get together for lunch. You could start a club like that in your wherever you're located, and the whole objective is to kind of in a confidential manner share war stories around sustainability. It's a great opportunity to learn what other companies are doing. I mean, that's how this has grown so fast, is because we all talk.
Chris?
Yeah, because I was in a job where my title was sustainability, I know from personal experience, and I know from my peers in higher ed as a sector, by and large, sustainability folks in higher ed are like generals without an army. They're told to go win a war, but they're generally not given the resources to do it, or even really given the mandate to do it. And so our kind of group wisdom was always that our title might be sustainability this or that, but our real job is to change our organization. And that's not our title. So successful sustainability folks, unless there is a clear top-down mandate where there's already buy-in at the senior level, if there isn't, your job is to create buy-in at the highest level. And one of the most powerful ways I've seen in doing that successfully is through peer influence. What's my competitor doing? And if I can elevate to my senior leadership that a competitor is doing something, or a friend, a collaborator or competitor, someone that your senior leadership respects, then they either want to do it better, or at least they at least say, it lends credibility to whatever you might be trying to advance if you can show that someone that they respect or fear is doing it.
Okay, thanks.
I have one other suggestion, which kind of relates, but if you're in an organization that has, well, I guess this is just general advice. And I think it's good advice. I don't know that I ever heeded it, but I think it's good advice. And that is, if you see an area that's of interest to you somewhere in the company, volunteer for a project, and you'll get a network, you'll gain experience and expertise. So you'll learn a lot from it. So that's, I think, just kind of keep that in mind, and find a mentor early on. Find somebody that you can, not somebody you report to, but somebody in a different part of the organization that can help guide you on your journey.
Yeah. Thanks, Holly. Stu, the last word for you, or last word of wisdom on this topic before we close?
Yeah, I think I don't know, words of wisdom. I think you're in an exciting field that is only going to grow. Again, I guess it is an overarching guidance is really develop because I think this is where we're transitioning to understand a balance between taking care of the environment and the economics necessary to justify that. That's the only real measure of a long-term sustainable solution. And at the same time, recognize that while we've been focused on, I think, reactive activity for the last 20 years or so, we're in the mood now where it's going to be very proactive, and recognize that the actions we're taking are part of a big, comprehensive system. And we're seeing that now, at least from my perspective. It's not only that companies are getting guidance and encouragement from NGOs and from regulators, they're getting it from their employees, and they're getting it from their customers. So they're looking at supply chains and saying, hey, we got to have a sustainable solution, not just for us, but that actually works for the entire comprehensive ecosystem. And that just tells me that this is going to grow and grow and grow and be part of the way we operate going forward. So I think you're in an exciting field, and I wish I had another 30 years to dedicate myself to it, because I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Thank you. All right, we are well out of time, but thank you all for such a great discussion. And I want to really thank our panelists for all of the advice and insights that they have shared from their experiences. They're invaluable for people who are joining, and including me. I work in this area, but it's so great to hear from people who are out there in the field actually practicing sustainability and trying to change the way it's done in the private sector.